So I'm going to come clean. We're in the middle of launching a platform. So originally we said we're going to do this logging for health and happiness thing. Because we're launching a platform, I had no time to write slides. So I'm going to have to reuse some stuff I did for a DevOps summit a couple of weeks ago. And Tom has put a bunch of stuff about logging in, so hopefully it will sort of make this thing come together. But we're going to whiz through, because there are 40-something slides. And the first one says I'm short on time, which is true. So I'm the head of DevOps for Arcadia. So if you have that title, you're probably doing it completely wrong and your DevOps was all screwed up. And Tom is the dev manager for Arcadia and saves me a lot of the time. Not to scale. So everything I'm about to tell you is not to scale, which means it probably won't suit your needs, or it might, or some bits might. So take the bits that you want and discard the bits that you don't. The scale will affect almost everything we do, and so things for enterprise typically don't work at startup, and startup size don't work at enterprise, and la la la. Got hygiene. So this is an interesting one. So a lot of the time into DevOps, when you're trying to create something like canary flow, so you want a canary environment, you want your main environment, you want to do trunk-based development, this is really easy to deliver in DevOps. Really simple thing that we do this all the time. What we don't often think about is the hygiene required on the development side to do this. So I'm an SRE, site reliability engineer. I dev, I write code, production code, I work on production applications, and I do the DevOps side of things. And so half of the time that I spend in work is babysitting us through the journey it's required to take us to a necessary level of hygiene in order to support pushing to something like your trunk, which means going to a canary environment, which goes to real customers, and being able to build the tests required and the confidence required for you to be able to say, okay, I have done a piece of development, I've built a feature, I have synthetics around this, I have 100% test coverage. 100% test coverage, if you really think about it, is probably about half of the test coverage you actually need. And I will get you to that point where you've done all of these things, and you can be confident as a developer that you're pushing it into that production environment, and you're safely not affecting customers. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we need to go and do, logging, synthetics, test coverage, in order to get you to the point where you can do continuous development, continuous deployment into a production environment with real customers every single day. So emerging to master. This is quite interesting. So trunk-based development, I'm a huge fan of trunk-based development. It's really quick, it's really agile, it's very easy to not have to think about all the things to do with merging. It's pretty much just like one thing. One thing to think about, and I tend to prey on human behavior quite a lot, is the fear of merging to master. As a developer, knowing that if I merge to development and I push this thing out, it's going to be in front of real customers is an interesting thing. It really pushes me from an emotional level to think, you know, can this hold up? If my peers look at me and say, hey, Aubrey, you wrote this feature and you pushed this feature out, how come you didn't write this test? How come you didn't have the synthetics? Did you test this thing? Did you modify the synthetics to go and test this path? Now it's in the context of the entire site. So I'm constantly leveraging that fear, trying to push you to get to that point where you're confident, your dev levels are super high, super sane. So stubs and mocks, consumer-driven test contract, consumer-driven contract testing, so it's packed and packed broker, trunk-based development. So these are some of the things that I'm constantly trying to leverage to do this. So when we think of like monolithic applications and whatnot, and we have upstream dependencies on those, they will kill your cadence, they will kill your velocity. So a lot of the time we talk about microservice patterns. What we want to do is try and chop up that thing into smaller models so we can go and bring people on board and get them working faster. Stubs and mocks are a really easy way of doing that. So you go and take something, turn it into a microservice, make sure that all those stubs and mocks and upstreams are in place. It's quite easy to get going a lot faster. I was going to say something important. Yeah, consumer-driven contract testing, obviously it means that if you have a problem where you're dependent on somebody else's service and the ground is shifting underneath you, this is quite interesting. So you're essentially putting in a model, something using packed and packed broker, you can put a model in place which means your dependency would not be able to push unless they're compatible with your contract, which is a really interesting pattern because it actually kind of forces a conversation between teams. And what's really useful is that if you are using something like trunk-based development, it means it forces a conversation with teams that might not necessarily have spoken before, which is quite cool. And especially if you're a new developer, it's like, oh shit, I broke the build. I need to go and talk with these guys. And so that's a really cool way of making sure that everything still slickly works and then still inspiring the confidence for the new people to be able to just keep doing their thing. So logging as an engineering fundamental, this is a concept I push all the time. And nobody really thinks of logging as a fundamental engineering principle, but it really is, especially when you're doing microservices. So I had a bunch of stuff that I was going to say about this, but I'm going to skip it and go to this one, which is we went for New Relic, and we should have outgrown EKK and Grafana first. And what that means is that we had a huge hole in Arcadia. When we looked at our logging and our microservice pattern and what we were doing in terms of like how we looked at application, what was going wrong, our intelligence, dashboarding to people inside technology, we had a huge hole. And we went for the best tool. We went for a really great tool and we were like, New Relic will solve all our problems. And what we did was go to New Relic and we went there straight away, and so we didn't have all of the hygiene that went with getting to a service, which is really interesting. So if you think about going to the best thing, a lot of the times you haven't been on the journey, and then you don't really understand how to use the tool, and so you give everybody this really great tool, and no one really understands how to use it. So what we probably should have done is something that I pitched quite a lot, is to start really small with a really small tool, and then outgrow it into the point where we're sort of bursting at the seams, and then go for something mildly better, and then you'll have all the journey, all of the experience that goes with getting to that point, and then when you get to the really, really cool thing at the end of the journey, you'll be able to leverage that to the full extent. So Tom is going to take over.
I'm going to click it. Sorry. I'm going to caveat this with we're changing things a lot at the moment, so this is pretty much right for now, but might not be what we're doing tomorrow. Also, if I have any questions that anybody asks me at the end, I'm going to try and leverage people up there who are working on this at the moment, day to day, who's shaking his head at the moment, who might not be able to help me. But, so the problem, so as Aubrey says, when we started looking at logging at Arcadia, we didn't have anything in place. We were running around like headless chickens. We didn't know where the problems were coming from. We didn't know why production was having issues. We didn't know what part of the code was behaving badly. And the reason that we didn't know that is because we didn't know anything. And what we did at the time was we went and we did what a lot of people do, which is you find the best service online, you talk to their salespeople, and then you go, let's just put New Relic in, let's put Datadog in, let's put something in. But just throwing something at it and not really configuring it properly and just letting it do its thing, while it works and while it's good, it doesn't necessarily give you as much as if you'd done it yourself, and almost as if you'd gone back to the basics for it. So what I want to talk today about is the right way, what we should have done from the start, and what I'd advise and what Aubrey would advise. And I think that what most people should do if they were picking this up now, so if you have a production platform or a dev platform, a QA platform, and you don't have any sort of logging in place for it, you really need to start looking at it. You really need to think about what you're wanting it for, what's the right way to do it, and at the end of the day, why you care about it. And the reason that, the biggest thing for me, why we're looking at this, is speed. And it's not just speed of one thing, it's speed of a number of things. It's the speed to logging. So you want to put some logging in to find out your issues, but you don't want the logging to become an issue itself. You need to make sure that whatever platform you're putting in doesn't impact on the app. So you're not sitting there waiting for timeouts as you send the data off to these logs. You need to make it as fast as you possibly can, because you need to get the results as fast as you possibly can. So you can push all your logs out and you can store them in, S3, and then you can pull them down, you can analyze them and have a look at them the next day, but it's not really good enough. You need to be finding a platform where you can push it in and find it out now. You need to be having something that's as real time or as close to real time as you can possibly get, because if you've got an issue on production at the moment, there's no point saying we'll wait 15 minutes before the logs all pass and then we can see what the issue for it is. And you need speed to develop. You don't want whatever you're doing for your logging to impact on the development lifecycle. You don't want all the engineers having to spend like 5 minutes extra on every task to add the logging in because they can't remember how to do it or the complexity for it. You don't want them to have to be sitting there thinking, do I need to log this? It should just be an obvious thing. It should be, do I need to log this? Yes. How do I log this? This is the way to do it. So I'm going to touch on the architecture of what we have at the moment, although this is subject to change. I'm not going to talk about this too much because it's more of a JavaScript talk. We're on a DevOps talk, and the DevOps stuff is something that you do. So we have all of our logs going into CloudWatch, and all of our logs going into CloudWatch just from an app point of view, because you log, it just logs straight to CloudWatch. That then gets picked up by a Lambda function, we're obviously AWS, and that gets just pushed into Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch, you can then search through Kibana, which is nice. If anybody's looking for like a nice, simple, quick interface for logging and looking at that, Kibana is initially, to start with, a little bit complicated, I think, but the power of it and what you can do with it is very strong. But you don't want to look at that. You want to look at what we do, how we log. So this is how we log in Arcadia. Obviously, the top two, we log on the server side, we log on the client side. But you want it so that it's just one import line. You want that it's a case of you don't need to think about it. You put it in there, and then you just log. So you don't want to have to be thinking about what function do I use, how do I push the data into it. You want consistency across it. And what you want to do is that you want to have not everything logged as one thing. You don't just want to log all your data because there's no point to that, there's no use from it. It just becomes noise and it just becomes too much noise. You want a few things in it when you're doing it. You want the different levels on it, which I'll talk about in a second. That's very important. But you also want to try and segment that data as well. So namespace it, give it a sensible namespace, whether that's your API, whether that's the client side. Log obviously the message for it, make sure that that's sensible, make sure it's human understandable. You don't want to be sitting there saying, I don't understand what this log that's coming in is, I don't understand what this log is for. And then obviously like any additional information you want on the end. And just that one little snippet enables you to put as much information as you need, and enables you to put so much information in that you're not having to worry about like having a problem with the logging. You know that everything that you have is there. You're better to put too much information in and then have to like worry a little bit about parsing that rather than not having enough information in and trying to work out why you have the production problem. So the different levels that we have, we've got 4 levels on there at the moment, but we're moving to 5. I'll go over a little bit. So we've got error, which is the main one. So we classify that as level 50. So this is the one that you don't want to be having any of, really, ideally. This is the one that if something happens and this triggers, you need to be paging whoever's on call at the moment. You need to be dropping everything to fix it. You need to be making sure that you only put logs into this that you know that people are going to respond to. If you put too much stuff into this, people will just start ignoring it. And we've had that problem a little bit, where something will just get ignored, you won't know why it's there, and it's a case of, well, somebody else will pick it up. We don't need to particularly worry about it. Warnings. So warnings you want which are something that's gone bad, but you're not necessarily panicking about it right now. So an example that I have that not everybody may agree with is something like a bad password, where the users, like, they're not able to log into their account at the moment, but because they're getting it wrong. So you don't really want to know about that, but you might want to know about it at some point in the future because it might indicate that there's a problem with the site, maybe with the user experience for it. Maybe you've got a problem, but you don't want to know it immediately. You want to put in things into warning like the errors that you've deprecated, so you can keep tracking against them, you can see having a look at them and you can still see what's going on with them, but they're not waking people up and they're not pushing everybody to run around and to fix it. If this is happening too much, then it's something that you need to be looking at, but it's not a drop everything and look at it right now. Info, so informational errors. So this is more like for data collection. So this is more something that you'll be like collecting on A/B tests, something that you're going to use to improve the user experience of the site, something that you're going to be looking at a lot of data for, and something that you're going to have to like maybe have a think about how to parse it. So think about what you're putting into errors, think about what you're putting into warnings. You can pretty much put anything into info because unless you go in through looking at it, nobody's ever going to see it. Debug, obviously, is for when you're trying to track down those problems, and you'd only ever really put something into debug and only ever look at it if you're tracking down one particular issue. So you might have it, you'll push something into error, that'll trigger, everybody will panic and run about, and then you'll start going through the debugs, and then you'll start trying to work out where that error is coming from. With debug, you're going to log everything. So if this is more something that you'd enable on the servers, you wouldn't really enable it on the servers because all your platform would fall apart or your logging would fall apart. But you'd have some sort of toggle where you could enable this. So if you have a production issue at the moment, you don't know where it's coming from, switch the debug on. You can then push everything through it and you can see what's going on with it and you can track it down a lot quicker. And the last one is trace, which is like the log everything debug plus. So it's debug plus all the payload, plus as much information as you can possibly push into it. You'd never enable this on production unless it's like for some sort of weird last resort because it will bring down your logging platform. We enabled it a little while ago on production because we kind of had to for something, and the amount of data that it basically filled up the disk pretty much straight away. I mean, we were still using like AWS for it, but it went and hit all of our limits right off, because if you've got like thousands of transactions per second and you're tracking every single thing that everybody does and you're tracking all the information that they're pushing into that, you're just not going to be able to, it's just going to kill you completely. But it's useful, again, with this one to be able to enable it like on a per user basis, or have some sort of toggle so you can go into production, enable it, and then track everything back through. And we've done that a couple of times very nicely. So where do we log? We log at the moment on the server side and the client side. The reason for that is obviously we've got lots of nice stuff. We have a caveat like a little bit. So we have a React application which talks to a NodeJS backend. We have server-side rendering on the server side, and sometimes it gets a little bit difficult to see where some of these issues are coming from. So we log everything and try and synchronize as much as we can so that everything's logged on the server and the client. We use the same architecture for both, so everything goes into the same place. So at the moment for us that's Kibana and also New Relic, but we push it into there for both of them because it means that we can track all the way through. So we can see as soon as an error hits the client side, if we've got a spike in that, we can then trace that all the way back through to the server side as well. And also having all of our data into one place means that we can simplify our alerting as well and our monitoring. So we can say that if it throws a level 50 here, then it's going to go, that doesn't really care if it's a client or a server side, we'll then go and page whoever's on call. It also means that the stack traces can link through back to each other very nicely. So we rolled all this out and we were all very happy with it. We did it fairly quickly, so we got some stuff very good, we got some stuff not quite as good. The things that we did well and the things that I would very much recommend that everybody does. So we use JSON a lot because everybody uses JSON. It makes everything nice and simple. It means that we can standardize on things. To make that a little bit simpler for us, we use Bunyan. It's just a nice little node library. It means that we can make sure that when we're pushing and when we're logging, we can do the same everywhere. And we basically don't have to worry about exactly how it all happens. We just push it to there and it just works through. We use namespacing because it means that we've got a large app, we've got different people working on different aspects and different elements of those apps, and we're not flooding the whole team with all the information. It means that you can go and you can look at your one specific piece that you need to look at, and it means that you're not having to worry about, oh, Aubrey's pushed something in, and then that's like polluting all of my data. And we use a single trace ID or single correlation ID, and we do that both across the server side and the client side, and it means that we know that this user, so the trace ID, when you come onto the site, the first time you hit the origin, you'll get a trace ID back. New Relic does a similar thing as well, and it means that you can then know this error that's come from the client side, you can then track that back to the server side, so you can see easily like the reason for it and what was causing that error. Things we didn't do so well, so as with everything, some things we're great at, some things we learned lessons on. We started with the wrong tool, I think that's what Aubrey says as well. We started with New Relic and just chucked that in because it's the easy thing to do, you enable it, it just works. But it was too noisy, there's no differentiation in the levels for it. We got a lot of data that's going into there at the moment and not much that's happening with it because you look at it and you can't see any problems with it. When we push stuff out to production at the moment, sometimes something will throw an error and we don't necessarily see it in New Relic. It's a lot easier to filter down in Kibana, but we don't necessarily see it in New Relic because it's just a number. It's like our error rate is X%. It's like, well, has it gone up? Has it gone down? Nobody really knows. We mix the client and the server, and this goes back to the New Relic side again. Our current error rate in New Relic is just an error across client and server side. It doesn't really mean very much, and again means that things are missed because we've got like one number, and because some of the times we'll have a load of JavaScript errors, and those errors will come from third-party code, maybe from our own code, maybe from the server side. We don't really know. So again, things get ignored. Our error rate is far too high at the moment. I think it spikes sometimes around 30–40%, which sounds like it's terrible and everything's falling over, but it's not at all. There's absolutely nothing wrong really going on. There might be a few errors happening, but because everything has the wrong levels attached to it and because everything's mixed together, nobody really sees what's happening. And getting the errors right. So that again is a very common theme with all of this. Because the errors are wrong, because the levels are wrong, means that the error rate is too high, everything's all lumped into one place, so nobody really accesses it. But the good thing is, we've had some good success stories from this. We've been doing a lot of A/B testing recently with different things, and we're using this logging to validate the A/B test results. So we have different areas that we're different sources of truth, and the logging is definitely becoming one of those. It means that we can have a look and we can see if we push out a test to 2 different groups or 3 different groups or however many different groups, we can add that to the logging as well so that we can see that the logging, and we can see then very quickly like if there's an issue around one particular group, because we can filter down the errors based on that. So we can see like this test is underperforming for group A, but actually because there's a problem with that, and so it's not a fair result, I think it gives a lot more sort of like fairness to those A/B tests. It stops us panicking. It means that when we do have like a potential issue, we can track it down a lot quicker. Previously, it was a case of the alerting went off on New Relic and said, you know, the error rate is spiking. It's like, well, why is it spiking? So I don't really know. It takes a long time to go through it. Now with Kibana, we can go through a lot quicker, and we can say the error rate is spiking because there's one particular page that's doing it, and we can track down and say, that's just a front-end issue on it, or it's one page we don't have to particularly worry about, or like it's one particular user. So say there's a bot that's gone haywire and it's causing a lot of errors, so we can discount that, and we're not running about as much as we used to be. And we can fix issues when we do see them. So previously, again, like we had New Relic, something went wrong, New Relic didn't have as much information, it didn't have enough stack trace, didn't have enough debug in it, and we didn't really know where to look for it. Now we can quite easily go in and we can say, this error rate started spiking, check out the trace ID, push that back all the way through and find out a much quicker resolution than we had before.
Yeah, this is me. Right, back to 200 speed. Trace IDs and correlation IDs. It occurs to me that many of you might not know or have not experienced with this. So a trace ID or correlation ID is something you want to generate on your client side. You want to generate this just once, and you want to pass it through all your logging with every single logging, so you can go and follow this thing through your stack. Ideally, if you eventually have something like a booking ID or a transaction ID or something, if you can go and create a log entry with that and the other one, you can create a pivot, and then you can go and trail the other one through the stack and so on and so forth. And so ideally, you can go and eventually match up all these correlation IDs through your stack and have a whole picture of what a user journey was through everything that is your platform. The other thing is we wanted to talk about open tracing, which is really cool. Everyone go and Google this after you've finished. Open tracing is very interesting, but you'll need like Node 9x to go and do it, and you have to use async hooks, which is very experimental. But ultimately it looks very cool, and it's something that we're starting to look at Arcadia. So ChatOps for everything. I have a whole talk about this. It reminds me of the devolution from when I was a Visual Studio programmer to going to working with Node and just getting a glorified text pad. Suddenly I've lost all the like IntelliSense and things that used to support me. But it's kind of interesting in how fast I've gone from like I need to use the GUI to I can use Bash and I can use the terminal, and I'm actually very quick in doing that. And so ChatOps is, I guess, like quite quick in that respect. It's also quite interesting because when I can add people to my ChatOps platform, I can go extend my commands to them and the things that I have on my platform, my ChatOps platform, so I can give new tooling to partners quite easily. It's self-perpetuating, which is really interesting. So when I have somebody new join my team, quite often they're watching other people use ChatOps commands and they're starting to execute these things within the team. And so it's almost self-perpetuating. So when one person does it, the rest of the people either don't know how to do it or do know how to do it, start learning. And it's auditable, which is really cool. So whenever I see people doing KX commands and stuff locally, it's very, very scary. I guess when you're doing it through your ChatOps and you start like curtailing those commands, it's quite interesting because it builds like almost an audit log for you. So I built this the other day with one of my new starters. I wanted to spend time with them. I'll go through that in a bit. This is something that was just really, really quick. So we had a ChatOps client, which passed the trace ID to the bot, which built a query which sent to Elasticsearch, and Elasticsearch sends it back. And then we use handlebars in HTML and a CSS template to construct a HTML. And then I stole that off somebody, because obviously I'm pretty shit at CSS. And then we use Puppeteer to go and render this thing and take a screenshot and save that to Amazon Web Services and generate a secure S3 link to it. And what it looked like was this. Oh, it works. OK. So we're going to go and tell the bot, find trace ID, blah, 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 blah. So this is the correlation ID for an actual user on the site. We run the correlation ID. Hold on, I'm just going to get that for you. So off he goes to Elastic, pulls back all the events, formats them using this CSS HTML template, and then generates this giant screenshot, which is saved to S3, which is a really nice timeline of everything that the user did on our site. And it took us less than a day to go and write, and it's quite some ephemeral tooling. I don't consider it very clever or pretty, but it's quite useful to some people that want to access this information. We can do more with it, less with it. It's one of these really quick things. It's pretty throwaway. I liked it. Lots of people liked it. We actually wrote an on-call system, which I can't show you today because Teams is killed over, but that's quite interesting too because that took a day. Engineering for today's challenges. This is a really interesting one when I talk about with my team and other engineers, and some people get really pissed off and angry with me. As engineers, we have a predisposition to engineer for the future, or things that might happen or things that we think are likely to occur. It's very difficult, if you think about it, to compel yourself to thinking about the current problem that you have. I had a discussion with some engineers in Arcadia the other day about how to do feature flags on the site. And they were talking about 3 weeks, and I was talking about 4 hours. And the reason that I was talking about 4 hours was because I was thinking about doing one feature flag through the bot that I could enable in real time. And they were talking about every feature flag and all the things that might go wrong with it. And so consequently, you see the enemy of delivery. The enemy of delivery is over-engineering things that might happen. And so the thing that I really hent up about was the fact that if I was to enable 3 feature flags, that one of them might clash with the other 2 feature flags. And I said, well, hold on, I don't have that problem. I've got 1 feature flag. And they said, but 2, you might have that problem. And I said, well, the truth is actually if I go to 10 feature flags, I still might not have that problem. And technically, I'm over-engineering for something that might happen, but I haven't got that problem yet. And so I can basically go and engineer for the thing that I have today, the problem that I have today, and say, well, actually, if I need to adapt that solution, that becomes part of tomorrow's dev work. And it's very difficult to think in that mentality. It's very difficult to find a trade-off between quality and speed. I think if you think about this sometimes during your day and you try this out and you start thinking, oh, I'm over-engineering, I think about a thing I'm trying to do for tomorrow, can I drop that and just do the thing that I'm trying to do today? Sometimes you get things out a lot faster, but it's kind of a different mindset. In Aubrey's world, what is DevOps? So DevOps is a convergence role. It's a convergence role because the space that we work in has changed. Traditional operations has changed. I used to do data center building, GTMs, Tor switching, core switching, your switching, SRIOV. These things pretty much don't exist in the cloud anymore. So yes, I can go and still build a data center, but probably only Google and Yahoo and those people don't really want me to do it, which is kind of interesting. And so what we've seen is the commoditization of this hardware on cloud. And because we've seen that commoditization, we've seen accessibility go up. And so if you want to go and work with these things, it's as code, which is really interesting because it starts to shift away from the traditional, I am an ops engineer with hardware, to actually I need to go and write code to go and do this, which is more in the dev space, which is why we see this convergence role. Tor switching, core switching, infrastructure as code. It's really easy to use, which is why you guys should go and try and do that. And there's no barrier of entry for you getting in. So if you were a Cisco person once upon a time back in the day, you were going to go and buy your Cisco stack off eBay probably and your ASA firewalls and the special little Cisco plug to go and work with it. You don't need to do that anymore. In the cloud, you just go and put your credit card in and off you go. If you're not writing production code, you're not an SRE. So if you say you're an SRE, if you say you're a site reliability engineer, I expect you to write production code. I expect you to work on the application. I don't think you're somebody who just happens to know like half of a programming language. I expect you to actually work on the application next to the engineers that are programmers on it and do that stuff and my stuff. I put the little thing from Dark Souls in there because it's pretty hardcore. Somebody pointed that out last time. So writing like ops quality Python code doesn't really make you an SRE. SREs spend half of their time writing production code. They spend half of their time writing system stuff. So you're building infrastructure. You're also perpetuating this idea within the development team. So you're constantly looking at angles to go and push this skill set through the rest of the team. You want to make yourself extinct. You want to make everybody else just like you, like Borg. So operations, I did every talk I have to put like, So operations, code, unicorn, cloud. I don't know why I put the unicorn in there. I have to put it in every talk. So it's really difficult to take this path for like whatever reason. It's so hard to take an operational engineer, a traditional ops person, teach them code and get them to build like cloud stuff. It's really easy to take a developer and say this is the domain model and get them to go and do it the other way. One of those things we're facing. Interesting, painful, because I am actually happen to be a developer, so it's very easy for me to do this thing. It's really hard for me to find people on the market that are able to do this. Another principle, do the simplest thing. Do the PR, get the buy-in, outgrow the simple thing and replace it with a much better thing. And so this comes down to, so a really good example was AWS Elasticsearch. There are a lot of limitations with this thing, really, really painful. And once you get beyond Kibana and you want to start targeting Elastic directly, which means you're crafting like JSON posts to it, and then firing it and hoping for a response back, you're pretty much beyond like the basics. And you can't use regex, and it started to keel over, and we had a bunch of problems with this, and I started to do some crazy aggregated query, and then that caused it to fall over. And we start to realize that we've outgrown this thing in a couple of weeks, and now we're ready for the bigger thing. And so there's actually a neat little point here about if you have funding issues and you already have a cloud platform, it's quite easy to go and push through this stuff because the cloud obfuscates what you're spending money on. And quite coolly, Elastic.co is a partner with AWS, which means you can run it through the marketplace, which means you can run it into the billing, which means you can hide it when you want to go and move it to somebody else and you don't want to do a funding paper, which I like. I don't like funding papers. So yeah, do all that stuff, do the PR, spend lots of time with developers. So I spend lots of time in Arcadia running around with developers, spending time with them, showing them all the things that I built, showing them how to use those things, doing the PR, making sure they understand it. Quite ironically, when I came into Arcadia, the guys had actually wrote Elasticsearch and it was sitting there dead. And I couldn't really understand it because logging makes me very excited. And I was like, why is nobody using this? And I was like, well, they don't kind of know. And I was like, okay, well, did you do the PR? And it was just like, no. Okay, well, let's go and build a better thing and we'll go and do the PR. And so we ran around and I literally sat with quite a few people, stakeholders in the team, and showed them how to use this thing and why it was valuable to them. And then by the end of the week, it was intrinsic and we couldn't live without it. PR is very important. Don't forget the PR. Circle CI, not Jenkins. Everybody hates Jenkins. It's a pile of shit. I want to get rid of it. Circle CI is so much better. Truth be told, it took 2.5 weeks for me to rebuild our entire pipeline in Circle CI. It was really interesting because in the same week that I did that, I had about 400% engagement increase from the developers using Circle rather than using Jenkins. Jenkins requires a specific skill set, requires maintenance, it's one of those things you have to install. There's a whole bunch of crap that make it inaccessible. You need a fucking proxy when you're offsite. Absolute pain in the ass. Circle CI is great. I love this thing. It means that you guys just need your Git login to go and hook into this thing. You can go and see build straight away. It's one YAML file. I mean, that's amazing. One YAML file for you to go and build your own pipeline, and you don't have to talk to me. I love that. And so literally in 1 week, we had 4 people go and modify that pipeline, add new pipelines, add new projects, and we had never seen this level of engagement when we worked with Jenkins, which was phenomenal. So always kill Jenkins and replace it with something better. The one thing I'd say about that is that Jenkins conflates 2 separate things, which is arbitrary job running and your build pipeline, building whatever assets or artifacts you have. If you can separate those 2 things, it's quite easy to get rid of Jenkins. If you can't and you have lots of jobs on it, then you'll find it quite difficult. Put it in the bot. From 0 to a rocket with just AWS keys and GitHub. So when I talk about the developer experience, obviously as a developer, it's quite core to me to get in and get going and show my value. I find that most devs don't like working with Vagrant. Most devs don't work on like Docker. They don't like the constant Docker rebuilds of the containers and stuff like that. So I'm constantly looking for the angle. And the angle for me is how fast can I get you going? How fast can you work on your machine? I don't want to cause you friction. So when I talk to my traditional ops people, and I have to train them out of this quite frequently, they're like, oh, this is really good, so you should be using Docker. And I think obviously if you're working with React, you're constantly rebuilding a Docker container, it's constantly watching the file system, it's a total pain in the ass to work with. It's not what you want. So if you work with me, it's really great because you've got a developer that understands it. If you work with my other guys, they have to be trained out of it. So I'm a predator of human behavior. Predator, right? I'm an asshole. I'm constantly looking for an angle with you guys to go and introduce new tooling. So I'm looking for the best, fastest tooling. The truth be told, I actually don't give a shit about what I implement. I really care about my ideas and the things that are going to make us do something better. So if you have a specific piece of tooling, I'm happy to work with that tooling. I'm happy to go and work with something that I've never worked with before, if that's what you want to use, if that's the new greatest thing, it's going to help me get my angle in. Immediate value, the quicker you can get going, the quicker you can show value. It's part of the Agile Manifesto. I use it quite a lot. Again, coming back to that point about simplicity, this is a really simple thing. Think about engineering for today. The moment you can go and deliver that really simple thing and you can go and show it to everybody, do the PR and say, hey, look, here's the instant value. If you need to make that bigger or fund it or do more of it, it's very easy for everyone to refer to it and say, like, oh, you know, it's intrinsic to how we work, right? Because you did the PR. Lead by example. So I do lots of mob programming with people. I will put myself under the spotlight. I have like zero fear of anyone criticizing my crappy ES4 code because it's shit. I don't get to do this all the time. I have to work with all the stuff in the DevOps space and all the stuff in the dev space, and so my skills drift, and so I'm happy for anyone to criticize me, so I will always lead by example and stand up there to be massacred by everybody. And there's always value in failure. That's true, right? So ArcBot, which is our internal bot in IT, took 3 days to build in total. One of those days it took me fixing a bug in BotKit. One of those days was spent figuring out weirdness in MS Teams versus Slack. Don't use MS Teams. And I wanted to showcase these to show how easy CD, CI, and 100% hermetic test coverage was. Literally 3 days, and then it probably would have been 1 if it wasn't for the bugs. It was something that I was able to demonstrate continuous delivery. It was something I was able to demonstrate Canary. It was a really good showcase for me. It was very isolated. And what was great is it started to show its value immediately to the point where I had the head of engineering actually working on the bot within a couple of weeks of deploying it and saying, hey, you've actually got a bot you can work with, which was pretty cool. Good buy-in. Wait, hold on. There was something else I wanted to say. Yes, imparting your values. Wait, there's another side about that. Right, so feedback, please. Yes, I will always let people review my code. I don't get to work on different things. I think I told you all this. So my code tends to be like all right. I don't think I'm the best coder in the world. I don't want to be the best coder in the world. I do a bunch of other stuff, so I'm happy for you guys to criticize. It's also really great when somebody sits with me and they go, actually, you could do that a much better way. And I'm like, shit, I missed a whole year of like JavaScript upgrades. It does happen. Fearless, get my code reviewed. All it takes is one asshole to create a toxic environment. This used to be me. I used to be the asshole. If you ever worked with me before, I was a fucking asshole. I'm not anymore. Estrogen changes you significantly, and it's really hard to be horrible to people without crying at them afterwards. And so I have to be much nicer. I've historically been responsible for overworking my team, creating very shitty cultures and atmosphere, and much nicer to work with. I really care about how you feel on my team. I get a lot of good feedback these days, mainly because I think that actually if you're really nice to the people you work with and you create a really great working atmosphere, you'll get so much more yield out of people, which is what I want. And I want you to enjoy what you do. I want to remember that like we're trying to leverage the thing that made you become an engineer in the first place, the thing that you love. You know, you're not going to work on something like it's a startup if you hate it and if you love the platform, but I'm likely to get evenings and weekends out of you if you really love what you do. So I'm trying to create an environment where you love to be an engineer. When you join my team, you will spend time with me. She said it would be fun. You will get to spend time with me. It's really important. So it's important that I didn't missell you. So when I tell you you're going to do something with my team and this is the vision, whatever, I try and make sure that's true. I want you to experience what it's like working with me because all the other people have and they know how to work with me and they work like me, which means they'll sell the same vision that I will, and they will work with other people like I will, and they will also sell the same solution, which is really important. So we have a unified front in terms of what DevOps means and how we present that and impart it to you as the business. I put something about talking about handbags, makeup, Dark Souls, and how I used to be an ex-cage fighter. I don't know why. So, thank you. If you thought this was awesome, tell me on Twitter. If you thought it was shit, tell me on Twitter. If you thought I should have prepared better, tell me on Twitter. Those are Tom and my handles, and also Arcadia are hiring. Thank you.
Thank you.